So John Keith, thank you so much. And I know you've been China many times when you were Prime Minister. And how many times you've been China? Can you remember?
I've been 11 times to China, I think, actually. So I came 7 times when I was Prime Minister, and to a variety of things. Obviously, the Shanghai Expo, APEC when it was hosted in Beijing in China, and a variety of other things. Boao Forum, obviously, in Hainan Island. But in total, 11 times.
I'm sure every time you visit China, you have different agendas. And by the way, welcome to China again.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And I heard that your last visit to China will include Beijing, Hainan, Shenzhen, Hong Kong, etc. So what are your expectations or expected objects of these two?
It's always great to be back in China and have a chance to engage with the leadership here. I also took one of the big companies that I helped support, BHP, which is the largest mining company in the world and a very large exporter of commodities to China, so very much a two-way relationship. But also just with Stonewood Key, you know, we are a fund in New Zealand, and so again just an opportunity to introduce the fund and the concept and the ideas that we have, and see if there's interest, you know, both for us to make investments in China and for Chinese investments in New Zealand.
I also learned about that this trip also is a preparation work for the entrepreneur delegation coming in September. Can you tell us more about it?
This is such a fast changing and growing market. It's very difficult, you know, when you're outside the country and you don't get a chance to see what's really happening. Sometimes you get media portrayals of things that are happening in China which may not necessarily be accurate, and so coming here, being on the ground, feeling the pulse of the country, whether it's in Hong Kong, whether it's here on the mainland, it's really interesting, and a lot of friends here, so a great chance to catch up.
And you got close to many entrepreneurs and many companies of New Zealand. Of course, you talk a lot with them. So how do they really think about Chinese market nowadays, especially after the pandemic?
Yeah, look, I think the market is still enormous here. I mean, so for a country like New Zealand, you know, the Chinese market has enormous opportunity, and we've seen that over the years. In the time that I was Prime Minister, you know, we were lucky enough to sign the free trade agreement, and that gave New Zealand companies and entrepreneurs access to 1.4 billion people. Well, that is an enormous opportunity. Now, you can't service all of those, but you can really make great inroads.
What are the ambitions? Before it was more simple, but now it's much more diversified. They want to enter the Chinese market, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of opportunities here. I mean, in the early days, I think the opportunity was pretty much around food, and that's because New Zealand produces really high quality food. And it was both ways. Again, you know, Chinese investment in New Zealand typically was in the food supply chain, so dairy factories and those kind of, you know, primary produce investments really. I think that's changed a lot now. There's a lot more around technology. I mean, China has been producing incredible technology and great scientific reforms here. So, you know, really for New Zealand companies, the opportunity, I think, is much broader than food. Tourism is a massive market, you know, to attract Chinese travellers to New Zealand. So really across the board, I think it's really endless.
I think it's not just about like a New Zealand brand coming to China. It's also very important for Chinese brand, Chinese companies going abroad. What can New Zealand do about it? Or what are you doing? Are you doing something about it?
Well, the free trade agreement opens up the pathway for both sides. So it allows, for instance, lots of Chinese students to come and study in New Zealand. It allows easier access of investment for Chinese companies into New Zealand. There's lots and lots of relationships and joint ventures that take place. And I think we just have a better understanding of each other. I think it's just a friendlier environment actually for a lot of Chinese companies to operate in New Zealand.
I worry it might be like influenced by political elements.
Well, there's always a degree of that. I mean, I think, you know, my government, which came in as Prime Minister in 2008, we were very much embracing China because we could see this enormous opportunity. And at the time, the global financial crisis was happening, and China was really the third leg of the stool, if you like, that held up the world, you know, economic growth. I'm talking positively of China because I believe it and because of what I experienced firsthand, which is there is enormous opportunity here. Many of the things that are portrayed in the Western media aren't actually correct. Now, so I don't think you measure a relationship about whether you ever have something that you don't agree on. I think what you do is try and build a relationship on what you do agree on and use that as an opportunity to have, you know, I think, sound and considered dialogue with one another. And I think, that's really the role that New Zealand can play, I think, is to be a very calm voice and have some influence actually in China.
Yes, I would like to mention two very important moments. The protocol to upgrade the China-New Zealand free trade came into force last year.
Yes.
And this year we both are going to negotiate on the negative list of the trade in services.
Yes.
So how do you think this will influence China and New Zealand trade in the future?
Well, if you take a step back and say what's the purpose of a free trade agreement, why would two countries sign that? The answer is to make doing business easier. And so free trade agreements lubricate the path for that, and all of these different changes as they go along, whether it's the services upgrade or various different extensions and rewriting of the agreement, are all about making life easier for those companies on each side to do business. And the easier it is, the more business that they'll do. So they're all positive things.
How do you think it's going to be beneficial to not just China, also the world, especially like South Pacific countries, if China can join the CPTPP?
We're very supportive. I think it makes a lot of sense for China to be admitted to that agreement, because there's really an agreement of trading countries largely in the Asia Pacific region, of which why would you exclude by far the biggest economy, which is China? So I think trade has always been one of those things where if we start exchanging and trading with each other, then we have reasons to talk to each other, hopefully more rationally, and to understand each other better. So the whole purpose of really trade, I think, is to say that is an area largely we can agree, not always, but largely agree. And from that, maybe we can start discussing in a more calm and considered way some of the things that we maybe either disagree or things that we need to keep working on.